I had exactly 72 hours. That was a number I kept saying over and over inside my head as I stood outside that storage facility at 10 o'clock at night, cold wind cutting through my funeral suit, a small brass key biting into my palm, so hard it left a mark. 72 hours to design the most perfect, most airtight, most completely devastating trap that a man like Silas Thorne had ever walked into in his entire miserable life. And I was going to make absolutely sure he walked in smiling. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our story. Please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Important note, this is a fictional story with dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. Any similarities to real events are coincidental, but the lessons about trust, betrayal, and self-protection carry deep meaning. Now, let's continue with what happened next. My name is Leo Vance. I am 34 years old. I'm a corporate lawyer based in Chicago, Illinois, and until 3 days ago, I genuinely believed I had a solid handle on my life. I owned a decent condo downtown, nothing dramatic, but mine. I drove a sensible car. I wore suits that actually fit. I had a law partner I'd known for nearly a decade. I had a father who made the best smoked ribs in the entire Midwest. And I had a mother who called me every Sunday morning without fail, and somehow always managed to make me feel both loved and mildly guilty about not calling her first. Until 3 days ago, that was my life. Clean, ordered, manageable. And then a gravedigger pulled me aside at my father's funeral, and everything I thought I knew about my family collapsed like a building that had been quietly hollowing out from the inside for years. His name was Ray Dobbins. He was a short man in his late 50s with a weathered, creased face that looked like it had heard 1,000 secrets and stopped being shocked by any of them around 1998. He smelled like cigarettes and fresh soil, and he had the careful eyes of a man who spent his days around the dead and had learned to be very quiet about it. I'd notice him across the cemetery during the service, just a worker in the background, keeping his distance, doing his job with the kind of efficiency that's meant to go unnoticed. The burial had been small. My father, Arthur Vance, was not the kind of man who accumulated crowds. He was a retired accountant from Evanston, quiet, careful, meticulous to a degree that my friends growing up found mildly alarming and that I simply knew as normal. He loved woodworking. He loved old jazz. He made smoked ribs every 4th of July that people genuinely planned their summers around. He was also, apparently, the kind of man who could fake his own death with the precision of a military operation, which, I know, requires some explanation. We'll get there. The official story was a heart attack. Sudden, no warning. The kind of death that doctors describe in calm, clinical language that doesn't fully cover how savage it actually is to receive that phone call. I got the news on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in the middle of a deposition, and I remember sitting very still in that conference room after everyone cleared out, staring at a blank legal pad, trying to understand why the world still looked exactly the same. After the burial, I was standing by my car loosening my tie and trying to decide if I was hungry or just nauseous. The answer was both, by the way, which is not a combination I recommend, when Ray Dobbins appeared at my elbow as if he'd materialized directly from the soil. "Mr. Vance," he said quietly, not looking at me. His eyes were scanning the edge of the tree line like he was watching for something specific. "I need a moment of your time." "I appreciate it," I said, "but today's probably not the day." "Your father paid me," he said, 3 weeks ago. Paid me well." That stopped me. I looked at him. Really looked. The way you look at someone when your instincts shift from polite dismissal to actual attention. "Paid you to do what?" "Exactly." Ray Dobbins reached slowly into his breast pocket and produced a key. Small, brass, a bright orange plastic fob attached, the kind you get from a storage place. The number stamped into the fob read 69. "He paid me to bury an empty coffin," Ray said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and to give you this key after the service. He said you'd understand what to do with it." He paused, looked at me directly for the first time, and added he was very specific about the timing. "After the burial, not before." I stared at him, and then, Because the human mind sometimes genuinely cannot process new information and just defaults to denial, I actually laughed. Not a real laugh. More like the sound you make when something is so far outside the edge of normal experience that your nervous system just refuses to cooperate. Stop joking, I said. Son. His voice was flat and completely serious. I have been doing this job for 40 years. I don't joke about coffins. Ever. He pressed the key into my hand and leaned slightly toward me. Don't go home tonight. Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't go home first. Go to the storage facility on Wacker Drive. Unit 69. Go now. And go alone. He turned and walked away. No dramatic exit. No looking back. Just a short man in work clothes walking back toward the equipment shed, leaving me standing in a cemetery parking lot, holding a brass key, and feeling the entire architecture of my day collapse. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. A text from my mother, Carol. Leo, please come home. Come alone. Don't bring anyone with you. 2 instructions to go somewhere alone, from 2 different people, within 60 seconds of each other. My father taught me to look for patterns. He also taught me that patterns aren't coincidences. So, I drove to Wacker Drive. The storage facility was one of those anonymous places that exist in every city. Big orange roll-up doors, 2 bright fluorescent lighting, corridors that smell like old cardboard, and the specific sadness of things people couldn't throw away but also couldn't keep in their homes. Unit 69 was at the far end of the longest corridor, and my hands were shaking badly enough that I fumbled the key twice before I got it in the lock. Inside, 2 boxes, a laptop in its case, a burner phone still sealed in packaging, and taped directly to the back wall, a letter, 3 pages, front and back, written in a handwriting I had known my entire life. I read it standing up because I genuinely could not make myself sit down. The condensed version of that letter, and I still have trouble believing there is a condensed version, went like this. My father was not dead. He had not had a heart attack. He had staged the entire thing, down to the empty coffin and the paid gravedigger, because a man named Silas Thorne had found him, and because my father understood with complete clarity that Silas Thorne finding you was not a problem you solved by calling the police and hoping for the best. 25 years ago, Arthur Vance was not just a quiet accountant. He was a forensic accountant who consulted for the federal government on a significant financial crimes investigation. Silas Thorne was running one of the largest private money laundering operations in the Midwest, shell corporations, fraudulent real estate transactions, tens of millions of dollars in criminal proceeds flowing through legitimate businesses with such elegance that most of it looked like ordinary commerce from the outside. My father was the one who spotted the inconsistencies. He traced the money. He built the case. His work put Silas Thorne in federal prison for 17 years. Silas was released 4 years ago. My father had been tracking his movements ever since, quietly, carefully, the way he tracked everything, with spreadsheets and patience and the particular alertness of a man who knows a threat is coming but doesn't know exactly when. 3 weeks before the funeral, Arthur received a package at the house. Inside, surveillance photographs. Our house. Our street, my mother's morning walking route, my work address, the schedule I kept that I hadn't written down for anyone. No note, no message, just the photographs, because the photographs were the message. My father understood immediately. Silas wasn't just back. He was close, and the only move that made any sense, the only move that would buy enough time to set something in motion, was to vanish. Make Silas believe he was too late. Make Silas believe Arthur Vance was already in the ground. The last paragraph of the letter was the one that changed my breathing. Leo, if you're reading this, it means Silas has already figured out the death was staged. He's too smart not to. And if he knows I'm alive, then your mother is already in danger. The burner phone has one contact. Call it. Do not involve the police. Silas's connections in the department I can't verify. And do not tell your little partner. Not a word to Gordon. I mean this. Call the number first. I'll explain everything. I read that line about Gordon 4 times. Do not tell Gordon Reed. Gordon Reed had been my mentor since I was a second-year law student who barely knew how to dress for court. He'd hired me out of school, taught me how to build a case, how to read a room, how to negotiate. He took me to my first real client lunch and under his breath, before we walked in, told me, "Leo, look like you've done this before, even if you haven't. Confidence is more valuable than certainty." I had carried that advice in every courtroom I'd ever walked into. Gordon had been the voice in my head when I didn't know what to do. He'd been at the cemetery that afternoon, standing right beside me with his hand on my shoulder, telling me how sorry he was, how Arthur had been a great man, how I should call him if I needed anything at all. He'd even teared up. I had noticed that. I had thought Gordon loved my father too. I had found it comforting. Now I stood in a storage unit rereading a dead man's letter, except the dead man was alive, and that T looked very different in this new light. And my father, who trusted almost no one, who verified everything, who kept records on records, had written Gordon's name specifically. Something cold moved through my chest. Not grief, not even anger, just a hard, clear, crystalline feeling. Like the moment in a negotiation when you realize the other side has been lying for the entire conversation and you finally understand what the real deal actually is. I picked up the burner phone and tore the packaging open. One contact saved under the name, DH. It rang once. Mr. Vance. A woman's voice, controlled, professional, the specific precision of someone who has been trained to sound calm under conditions that are not calm. "We've been expecting you. My name is Agent Diane Holloway. Your father is safe. We need to talk about your mother. Don't leave that facility." I want you to imagine, if you can, standing alone in a storage unit at 10 at night, holding a burner phone, having just read a letter from your supposedly dead father, and hearing a federal agent say your father is safe as if that is a normal sentence to receive. I want you to imagine what that does to a person's entire understanding of reality. If anyone watching this has ever had a moment where the ground just completely disappears from under a story you've been living in, I need you to drop a comment right now, because I'm telling you, the room actually felt like it tilted. I did not have long to process it. 30 seconds after I ended the call, the side door of the storage unit swung open, and Arthur Vance walked through it. He was thinner. He'd grown a beard. He was wearing the kind of clothes a man wears when he's been living carefully and quietly somewhere that isn't home. Nothing distinctive, nothing memorable. But his eyes were exactly the same. Steady, patient. The eyes of a man who has a spreadsheet for everything and has thought 15 moves ahead before the game begins. "Leo," he said. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked at him, and then I said the only thing that came out. "Dad." "I'm sorry," he said. The words were quiet and deliberate, the kind of sorry that a person has been carrying a long time, waiting for the exact right moment to set it down. "I'm going to explain everything, and then I need your help to bring your mother home." We sat on the cold concrete floor of that storage unit for 2 hours. Arthur told me everything, in the careful, sequential way he told all important things, beginning to end, no missing pieces, nothing omitted. He told me about the investigation, about Silas, about the day 4 years ago when he realized Silas had been released and had started quietly rebuilding. He told me about his agreement with Agent Holloway's team, how he'd been feeding information to them, helping them build a new federal case while also knowing that if Silas ever got close enough, the only protection he had was to become someone who wasn't worth looking for. And then he told me about Gordon. "Gordon has been working for Silas," my father said, in the same level tone he might use to describe a discrepancy in a tax document, "for approximately 2 years. The silence that followed that sentence was profound. "Gordon Reed," I said. I needed to hear myself say the full name, to confirm I wasn't misunderstanding. "Gordon had a serious gambling problem, one he'd hidden from you successfully. He owed a significant amount of money to people who aren't forgiving about debts. When Silas got out, he located Gordon through a mutual connection and offered to clear everything Gordon owed. In exchange, Gordon would remain in place, keep his position as your partner, stay close to you and to our family, and report back anything unusual. Meetings, conversations, any sign that I was still active." My father looked at the floor. "Gordon wasn't the one who directed Silas, toward your mother. But for 2 years, he's been making sure Silas always knew where to look. I thought about Gordon's hand on my shoulder at the cemetery, the warmth in his voice. The way he'd looked at me with what I had read as grief and I now understood was something much more complicated and much less honest. The thing about being a lawyer is that betrayal isn't abstract to you. You have seen it documented in affidavits and depositions and emails printed out in discovery boxes. You know how betrayal actually looks on paper. You know it's always more ordinary than the movies make it. Not dramatic speeches, not villainous monologues, just quiet choices made in private, one after another, that add up to something ugly. What I felt in that moment was not a dramatic breakdown. It was the very quiet, very specific feeling of recalibrating, of adjusting the entire map of the last 2 years against a new set of coordinates and realizing how different the terrain actually was. Agent Holloway joined us within the hour. She was direct, efficient, and had the particular energy of someone who has been working a case for a long time and is very close to the end of it. She told us that Carol had not gone home after the burial. She'd been intercepted by Silas's people on the drive back. They had her at an industrial warehouse off Ashland Avenue on the south side. She was unharmed. Silas wasn't interested in hurting her. He wanted leverage. He wanted Arthur. More specifically, he wanted the 4 years of financial documentation my father had been quietly assembling. Documentation that, in addition to supporting the old conviction, would tie Silas to a new set of crimes committed since his release. He'll make contact soon, Agent Holloway said. He'll offer trade, your father in exchange for your mother. We don't make that trade, my father said immediately. We are not going to, she agreed. We are going to give him something better to want. The plan took shape over the next 2 hours. It was elegant in the way that only plans built on a deep understanding of a target's ego can be. Silas Thorne was smart, but he was also a man who had spent 4 years methodically working toward one goal, and men like that develop blind spots. They become so focused on what they want that they stop asking whether what they want has been designed for them. We were going to design exactly that. The next morning, I went to the office. I sat across from Gordon Reed in the conference room we shared, and I performed the grief of a man who hadn't slept and had no idea what was coming. It wasn't entirely a performance. I was exhausted. I was furious. And I had been awake until 3 in the morning, rehearsing exactly what I needed to say and how I needed to say it. I told Gordon that I was struggling, that I'd found some documents in my father's things after the burial, financial records, folders, things I didn't fully understand. I said I was worried about what they meant. I let my voice crack slightly. I watched Gordon's face carefully from behind my own devastated expression. He was good. His concern was practiced and real-looking. The warmth was completely convincing. But I was looking for something much smaller than a crack in his mask. I was looking for the question he couldn't help asking. These documents, he said, leaning forward just slightly, voice careful and gentle. Where are they now? They it was. Not, are you okay? Not, do you need anything? The first question, underneath all the warmth, where are they? Still in the storage unit, I said. I haven't had the energy to go back. Probably tonight. I gave him the address. I gave him the unit number. And then I went back to my office and I called Agent Holloway and I said, he's going to call Silas within the hour. She said, we know. We are already in position. By that evening, Silas Thorne had received exactly the information we needed him to receive. An unguarded storage unit, an accessible evidence cache, a grieving son who didn't know what he was sitting on, the perfect opportunity. Neat, clean, undefended. What Silas did not know was that Agent Holloway's team had spent the day transforming that storage facility into the most thoroughly covered location in the city. 12 agents inside, 6 in the parking lot, 4 in the coffee shop across the street, cameras on every exit, and in the back of an unmarked white van on Wacker Drive, dead, buried, finished Arthur Vance, watching a live feed on a tablet and waiting. Silas sent scouts first, 3 men, loose and casual, who walked through the facility, found Unit 69, confirmed the boxes, confirmed the letter, confirmed the laptop. They walked out without touching anything and made a call. And then Silas came himself. He was taller than I expected, older, but in the careful way of men who have spent time in prison where staying physically competent is part of survival. He walked with the unhurried ease of someone who believes absolutely in his own outcome. He had 2 men with him, and he was on his phone when he came through the front doors, and he was smiling the smile of a man arriving to collect something that already belonged to him. He made it 14 feet inside. Agent Holloway stepped out from between 2 rows of units, badge in hand, voice completely level, and said the sentence I had been waiting for since I first read my father's letter 2 nights ago. Silas Thorne, federal agents, you under arrest. The smile didn't disappear immediately. I want you to understand that it faded in stages, like a light being slowly turned down. The confidence first, then the certainty, then the smile itself. As 12 agents materialized from the shadows of the corridor and Silas's 2 men put their hands in the air without waiting to be asked, because they were professionals and they understood immediately that the math had changed. And then the side door at the far end of the corridor opened, and Arthur Vance walked in. Silas saw him from 30 feet away, and every single muscle in that man's body went completely, utterly still. My father walked toward him slowly. No hurry. The quiet, deliberate pace of a man who has been waiting for years for this exact moment and is not going to rush it now. "Hello, Silas," he said. His voice was soft, completely calm. "I spent 4 years building the case that's going to put you away for the rest of your life. I wanted you to hear that from me, in person." Silas said something then. I'm not going to repeat it because it wasn't interesting or particularly creative. And men who realize they've lost everything tend to have very little left worth saying. 2 agents moved in on either side of him, and the cuffs went on. And that was the end of the part of the story where Silas Thorne had any power over our family at all. Simultaneously, because my father and Agent Holloway had planned this down to the minute, a second team hit the warehouse on Ashland Avenue. 6 agents, warrant in hand, moving through the building before Silas's people inside even knew anything had changed. My mother was in a back office, unharmed, sitting in a chair with her hands folded in her lap, in the specific where she sat when she was very angry and choosing not to show it, which, as anyone who has met Carol Vance will tell you, is considerably more frightening than if she'd just been visibly angry. I was there when she came out of the building. I had driven straight there from the storage facility the moment Agent Holloway gave me the all clear. My mother walked through the door and she looked at me, and the fury in her face shifted into something else, something more complicated and more honest. And she closed the distance between us and grabbed me with both hands like she was verifying I was solid. "Your father," she said into my shoulder. "I know," I said. She pulled back and looked at me. "That man staged his own funeral, Leo. His own funeral. Do you understand what it took for me to sit at that service and not?" "Wait," I said. "You knew." She gave me a look. "He told me the night before. I wasn't going to bury an empty box without knowing why." I genuinely did not know how to respond to that. My father planned everything. My mother kept every secret. The 2 of them had been conducting an entirely parallel operation while I stood at a gravesite mourning the man who was alive and eating takeout somewhere in a safe house. I love both of them completely. They have also both taken years off my life. We found my father in the parking lot of the warehouse, leaning against Agent Holloway's car, watching the street. And the 3 of us stood there together in the cold Chicago night, and nobody said anything for a long time. Some moments don't need words. Some things are just the pure, uncomplicated fact of, you're here, we are all still here. That's the whole sentence. Now, Gordon, I know you've been waiting. So, had I. It is what I want to be clear about. I did not go to Gordon in anger. I did not show up at his office with a recording or confrontation or any kind of scene. Because I am a lawyer, and I had thought very carefully about what justice actually looks like for a man like Gordon Reed. And the answer was not a dramatic moment. The answer was something much slower and much more complete. Gordon's arrangement with Silas was verbal, informal, difficult to prosecute criminally without a cooperation agreement from Silas himself, which we were in the process of working on but which would take time. What I had immediately, however, was something just as powerful: the full record of Gordon's communications, captured in Silas's own seized phones and documentation, showing a clear pattern of a practicing attorney sharing privileged information about clients and colleagues with a known criminal enterprise. I went to the Bar Association. I laid it out in the way my father would have: organized, chronological, sourced, impossible to dismiss. Every communication, every date, every piece of information Gordon had passed to Silas's people. I let the documents do the talking, because documents don't lose their composure, and documents don't get emotional, and documents don't give a defense attorney anything to work with. Gordon's license was suspended within 30 days pending a full ethics investigation. But I wasn't finished. Every case Gordon had touched in the last 2 years was now subject to review. Every settlement, every negotiation, every client whose confidential information had potentially been compromised. Because if Gordon was compromised personally, the question had to be asked: had he been compromised professionally too? The answer, as the investigation eventually found, was yes. 3 cases. 3 clients who had trusted Gordon completely and whose private information had been quietly passed along to a criminal network and used as leverage in ways those clients never knew and never consented to. Gordon Reed lost his license permanently. He lost his firm. He lost the standing and the reputation and the identity he had spent 30 years carefully constructing. The wise mentor, the trusted partner, the man everyone called when they needed someone they could absolutely rely on. He lost all of it, not in one dramatic moment, but piece by piece, in the slow, grinding, thoroughly documented way that the law dismantles things when it finally gets organized about it. He tried to call me once, about 2 months after everything was finalized. I let it go to voicemail. I have never listened to that voicemail. I deleted it without playing it, and I have never once wondered what it said. Silas Thorne was convicted on 12 federal counts: money laundering, conspiracy, kidnapping, extortion, and several additional charges that the prosecution added once the full scope of his post-release operation became clear in discovery. He is currently serving 40 years in a federal correctional facility in Indiana. He is 61 years old. Do the math. My father came home in January. He finished the bookshelf. It's red oak, one of those heavy, clean pieces of furniture that feels permanent, the kind that outlasts the person who built it. He put it together on a Tuesday while my mother made coffee and I sat on the floor handing him screws, and we talked about nothing important for 2 hours, which is to say we talk about everything that matters. At one point I looked at this man, this quiet, meticulous, woodworking, jazz-loving man who had faked his own death to protect his family, who had spent 4 years building a case in secret while watching baseball and making smoke ribs and acting completely normal. And I just started laughing. "What?" he said, not looking up from a shelf. "Nothing," I said. "Just, you." He made a small sound that might have been a laugh, might have been just breath. With Arthur Vance, the difference is subtle. I asked him later, after the shelf was up, after dinner, after my mother had gone to bed and it was just the 2 of us in the living room, whether he had been scared, not of Silas, not of getting caught, but of the other thing, of the moment at the funeral when he watched his son stand at his fake graveside and not know. He took a long time to answer. "Every hour of every day," he said finally, "but I was more afraid of what would happen to you if I didn't." I have thought about that sentence 100 times since he said it, not just in terms of what my father did, but in terms of what it means in general, the difference between the fear of acting and the fear of not acting, and how a person decides which fear is bigger. Arthur Vance was afraid. He was scared the plan would fail, scared someone would get hurt, scared Silas was smarter than him. But underneath all of that was a larger fear, and the larger fear won. That's the thing about love, I think. It doesn't make you fearless. It just reorganizes your fears into the right order. If you're still here, if you've made it through this whole story with me, thank you. I mean that sincerely. This story has taken me a long time to be able to tell in a straight line. So the fact that you stayed through all of it means something. If it moved you, share it with someone. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Whether you're in the US, the Philippines, Canada, New York, or anywhere else on this planet where people sit down with a story and let themselves feel it. Hit subscribe if you want to be here for the next one. Because here's what I believe. The stories that matter aren't about the criminals. They aren't even about the revenge. Satisfying as it is to watch a man like Silas Thorne have the smile fade from his face in a storage corridor with 12 federal agents closing in. The stories that matter are about the people who hold together when everything is designed to pull them apart. An old man who loved his family so completely that he was willing to disappear from it to keep it safe. A woman who sat through her own husband's fake funeral and kept a straight face because she trusted his plan. And a son who walked alone into a dark storage unit with a key from Gravedigger and chose to believe, without proof and without certainty, that the man who gave it to him was worth trusting. He always was. The bookshelf is still standing.